In the bustling heart of Lagos, where the roar of Danfo buses mixes with the scent of grilled suya and the Atlantic breeze drifts faintly through open windows, there stood an old, two-story building on Awolowo Street. Its paint was peeling, and the front gate had a stubborn rusted lock that seemed impossible to open without a push and a tug. Most neighbors avoided it, whispering tales of curses and restless spirits. But to Amoka, a young woman in her 7th month of pregnancy, it looked perfect, spacious, affordable, and close to her office. She had been warned about the building's history but dismissed it as old wives' tales. When Amoka moved in, the air inside the house was thick and heavy, almost as if it resisted her presence. The walls had stains that didn't come off, and the wooden floors creaked as though someone unseen was pacing above. At first, she blamed her imagination, the anxiety of impending motherhood, and the late hours she spent working from home. But soon, the strange occurrences became undeniable. It began subtly. At night, she would hear faint whispers outside her bedroom door. Sometimes, a cold draft would sweep through the room, though all windows were shut. Objects would shift slightly from their places, her slippers moved from the bedside to the kitchen floor, her water bottle would appear on the dining table even when she hadn't touched it. The first time she saw the shadow, it was in the hallway, a tall, thin figure cloaked in black, moving silently and vanishing the moment she blinked. Then came the dreams. Each night, she would dream of 3 women, old, twisted, with eyes like burning coals, sitting in a circle, chanting in a language that sounded older than Lagos itself. Their hands were gnarled, their nails long and sharp, and they always whispered the same phrase, "The child will not be yours alone." She woke from those dreams drenched in sweat, heart pounding, unable to shake the feeling that they were in the room with her. Amoka tried rational explanations: stress, superstition, exhaustion. She even called her pastor, who blessed the house and sprinkled holy water, but the disturbances only intensified. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she felt a cold hand brush her belly. The shock made her scream, and the kitchen lights flickered violently, plunging the room into shadows. On the fridge door, scrawled with condensation, were 3 symbols she did not recognize, and beneath them, the words, "We remember this place. We remember you." It was then that her neighbor, an elderly woman named Mama Nkechi, came to her door. She had lived in Lagos all her life and had a reputation for knowing things others refused to discuss. "Child, you must leave that house," she warned, her voice low and urgent. 3 witches lived there before you. They were feared in this city. They died here, but their spirits remain. They protect what they see as theirs. Your child, it calls to them. Terrified but determined, Amoka stayed. She needed the apartment, and her unborn child felt like a shield against the darkness, a light she believed could survive anything. The witches, however, were relentless. Mirrors cracked whenever she passed, eerie chants echoed from empty rooms, and at night, the shadows of 3 figures could be seen crouched near her bedroom, eyes glowing in the dark. She started leaving offerings, kola nuts, water, and salt at the corners of her rooms, hoping to appease them. Sometimes, she felt a presence press against her back in bed, almost as if trying to look at her baby in her womb. One night, the encounter became unavoidable. She awoke to the sound of footsteps descending from the attic. Heart racing, she grabbed a torch and slowly climbed the stairs. The attic door creaked open to reveal the 3 witches, standing in a triangle, their chants louder and almost deafening. Their eyes were fixed on her stomach. "The child," they hissed in unison, "will bring what we seek." Amoka, shaking but resolute, raised her voice. "This child is mine. You have no claim here." She grabbed the holy water bottle her pastor had given her and sprinkled it across the floor. The witches shrieked, their forms twisting and writhing, smoke like tendrils curling as they tried to retreat. But Amoka continued chanting prayers she barely remembered, tears streaming down her face. One by one, the witches were forced back into the shadows, leaving the room cold, silent, but finally empty. By dawn, the house felt different. The oppressive weight had lifted, the shadows gone, and even the creaking of the floors seemed quieter. Amoka knew they were not destroyed, witches never are, but they had been forced to leave her and her child in peace. When she gave birth to a healthy baby girl weeks later, she named her Chimamanda, meaning God's will. And every time her daughter smiled, Amoka felt the lingering presence of the past, but also the promise of her future, a future no shadow, spirit, or witch could claim. Yet, sometimes, when the Lagos wind blows sharply through Awolowo Street, Amoka swears she can hear faint whispers, 3 voices murmuring just beyond her window. She doesn't fear them anymore. She simply whispers back, "This house is mine, my child is mine, and your time has passed." Months had passed since Amoka had given birth to baby Chimamanda. Life seemed to have settled into a fragile calm. The house on Awolowo Street, once oppressive and dark, now held a quiet warmth. Sunlight streamed through the peeling curtains in the mornings, and the creaks of the old floorboards seemed almost like whispers of approval rather than warning. Amoka had grown confident. She felt the witches were gone. But some shadows, she would soon learn, never leave so easily. It began with subtle signs, a misplaced sandal here, a strange draft there, the faint smell of burning herbs in the kitchen. Chimamanda, now 6 months old, would sometimes giggle at nothing, or at shadows only she seemed to see. One evening, Amoka noticed it, tiny handprints, dark and cold, pressed into the fogged windows of the nursery. She froze. She had cleaned them, yet they returned every night. Mama Nkechi, sensing Amoka's unease, came again. This time, her face was pale, lined with worry. "Child, you did well before, but the witches are patient. They wait. They will not give up so easily, especially now that the child is strong. Chimamanda carries power they want. The house, it remembers." Amoka listened but refused to leave. She had fought them once, she could do it again. That night, as she rocked Chimamanda to sleep, she heard soft chanting outside the nursery window. The voices were faint but unmistakable, 3 women, singing in tongues older than Lagos itself. She tried to reassure herself that it was the wind, but Chimamanda's eyes were wide, staring at the corner of the room. The following nights were worse. Shadows moved independently of their objects. Curtains twisted violently. Baby toys were hurled across the room with invisible force. One night, Amoka awoke to the sound of her daughter crying. Chimamanda pointed to the ceiling, shaking, saying in a small, fearful voice, "They are coming, Mama." Amoka felt a cold dread creep through her. She remembered Mama Nkechi's warning, the witches waited for power, for the moment when fear and fatigue could make her falter. She called her pastor, who came armed with blessed water, salt, and incantations, staying late into the night toward the house. Yet, despite the prayers, she began seeing glimpses of 3 figures in mirrors, standing just behind her, vanishing when she turned. One stormy night, as thunder rattled the windows, the witches made their boldest move. Amoka was asleep when Chimamanda suddenly cried out, reaching for the ceiling. The air grew icy, and the lights flickered. Then the chanting started, louder and closer than ever. Amoka woke to see the 3 witches materializing in her living room. Their eyes burned red, and their fingers were long, curling as if ready to claim Chimamanda. Amoka, shaking but resolute, grabbed her baby and shouted a prayer. The witches hissed, a sound that made the windows shudder, and lunged. She threw holy water in their direction. One witch shrieked and twisted into a smoke-like form, but the other 2 advanced. Chimamanda, sensing danger, let out a cry that was not entirely human, power surged from her tiny body. The witches recoiled, their forms flickering and unstable. Amoka realized then what she had not fully understood: her child was not only a target but also a shield. The witches had underestimated the bond between mother and child, the love that could manifest as a force stronger than curses. Amoka chanted louder, calling upon ancestral spirits and the guardians of Lagos. Chimamanda's cries grew, echoing through the house like a call to the unseen protectors. The witches screamed in fury. "This house, this child, is not yours," they shouted, their forms dissolving into a cloud of black smoke. With a final, piercing wail, they vanished, leaving a stillness that pressed against Amoka's ears like silence itself. By morning, the house felt lighter, safer. Chimamanda slept peacefully in her cradle, and Amoka wept, exhausted but relieved. Mama Nkechi returned, nodding knowingly. "They may return," she warned, "for witches are patient. But the child is strong, and so is her mother. Keep faith." Keep your courage. The house is yours, as long as you protect what is sacred. Amoka never forgot that night. She installed protective charms, never allowed the doors to remain open at night, and kept a vigilant watch over Chimamanda. The witch's shadows no longer lingered, but Amoka knew, deep in her heart, that the house on Awolowo Street had a memory, and memories of the dark, especially when tied to power, never die. As Chimamanda grew, she became aware of her own unusual strength, sensing presences that adults could not. Amoka taught her to respect the unseen, to honor ancestors, and to be fearless. The witches were gone, for now, but the tale of their return became a cautionary story in the neighborhood, whispered to children and adults alike, beware the house that remembers its dead, for it may call them back. The end.